This is not a hero. This is just someone being grateful for what Christ did for them.
She came in totally broken, no hope, no faith, and left bubbling with joy with her faith restored in God. Everyone has a gift and everyone has a perspective, and that makes community richer.
When you're faithful at practicing and putting in the hard work and the discipline, it's amazing how God blesses those things and they flourish.
Good morning. Listen, welcome again, particularly to those of you who are guests with us. So glad that you chose to come and spend a bit of your morning with us. You found us in the fourth week of a summer series of messages that we are calling Everyday Heroes. And man, our desire in this series is to see and believe and live out this truth. That in the economy of heaven, there is a kind of life, there is a kind of person that is considered heroic. And contrary to what we might often believe, what heaven considers heroic is not that extraordinary person who did that extraordinary thing in that epic, extraordinary moment. But in the economy of heaven, the hero is the ordinary person who chose over and over and over to say yes to an extraordinary God in very ordinary moments, only to find themselves caught up in his extraordinary story. What we want to see is the idea of hero from a biblical perspective is just another way of saying faithful. The kind of person who leaned into God and said yes to him in the simplest of moments and over a lifetime accumulated a bundle of yeses that caused them to stand in the presence of Jesus and hear him utter those coveted words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And as a church, that's what we want. We want to find ourselves saying yes to God, even when it means a little more mess. We want to find ourselves saying yes to God, even in what seem like mundane and ordinary moments. We want to be the kind of people who say yes to God, an extraordinary God, make the most of what seem like mundane moments, and find ourselves living in a compelling, captivating story. This morning we want to continue our series, but we want to go off script a little bit by taking some time as a church to talk about what it looks like to say yes to God, to be everyday heroes in a country and at a time when there seems to be an epidemic of racially charged dissonance, and drama. If you've been paying any attention to the news headlines over the last several months, you know that those months have brought with them a growing number of violent clashes that are deepening the tension and widening the racial divide in this country. And unless you've been vacationing in the South Pole, then you know of the tragedy that we all awakened to last Friday morning. And in case for some reason you missed it, last Thursday evening at about 9 o'clock in Charleston, South Carolina, a 21-year-old man who, man, has white supremacist convictions, walked into a Bible study at a predominantly black African American church. They welcomed him with open arms. He sat in that study for an hour with them. And then he ended up carrying out what seems to have been his intention from the beginning. He opened fire and executed 9 of them while allegedly spewing racial slurs as he did so. And our hearts were rattled by the news as we discovered it in the hours following that. And as you can imagine, in the wake of that tragedy, on top of the Ferguson situation, along with the New York Eric Garner death by choking, and a variety of other tragic events that have come across the headlines, racial tension and division has just continued to stir. And people have fallen on different sides of the issue. Some people saying, hey, stop making it about race. It's not about race. And others are saying, no, it's completely about race. And some are saying the Confederate flag needs to come down. Black lives matter. No, white lives matter. No, all lives matter. But in all of this, one thing that has become painfully clear is this: the issue of racial prejudice and tension in this country is still a very real problem. Racial prejudice is still alive and well. Here's what I mean, by the way, by racial prejudice. I want us to understand this phrase, this term in context. And we'll put the definition of prejudice up here on the screen as we are using it. It's a preconceived idea about a person that produces dislike, distrust, dissonance, or distance. And that based on their race, ethnicity, or cultural background. Again, a preconceived idea about a person or a group of people based on their race. And that preconceived idea produces dislike or distrust or dissonance, tension, or distance. It's the idea of carrying an unverified perception about somebody that causes me to stand at a distance or treat with a little bit of suspicion based on color of skin, ethnic, cultural background. And church, that is a problem. Racial prejudice and the dissonance and distance it creates, listen, it breaks the heart of God, and it flies in the very face of everything He is about. And we as a church have got to realize that is a problem. In fact, but before we press into some of the issues we want to talk about, we want to be grounded in a powerful passage of scripture in Ephesians chapter 1 that gives us some insight into the heart and the heartbeat of God. Ephesians chapter 1 verses 9 and 10. We'll have these up on the screen. Feel free to turn there. But we want these thoughts to sit with us. And here's what it says. He, verse 9, that's God, made known to us the mystery of His will, according to His good pleasure, which He purposed in Christ to be put into effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. This is arguably the centerpiece of the book of Ephesians. But here's what this is doing. This is saying, hey, there is a mystery. There was a mystery that was kept behind closed doors for the Old Testament. God was holding out on when to reveal it, and He decided to do it in the church. with the apostles. And this idea of mystery of his will is just another way of describing the heart and mission of God. The heartbeat and mission of God was a little bit mysterious, but God put his epic heartbeat and mission statement on display, revealing it to the church. And so if you've ever wondered, what is God's mission statement? What is God after? What is his heart about? He tells us in verse 10 to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under the person of Jesus Christ. God's mission is to bring togetherness, to bring harmony, to bring unity out of discord. Because here's the story, right? When sin entered into the world, it broke and fragmented and distanced what God had made whole in the beginning. What God created in togetherness, sin fractured and fragmented. And so because of that, man and God were now separated because of sin. Man and man were now separated because of sin. That's one of the first things we saw with Adam and Eve. There was tension and there was blame, and then it trickled down to their kids who had this sibling rivalry and feud that ended up in a bloody murder as man and man were torn apart by sin. Man and creation were even distanced. We have drama with the earth. Try weeding and cutting the grass over and over again. When sin entered the world, it destroyed and divided what was whole. And yet here's the gospel, that when Jesus Christ entered into our world, he came to carry out God's heartbeat and God's mission of restoring and reconciling what was broken and distanced. That's what the cross was accomplishing. Bridging what was distant and mending what was broken. And so now, isn't this the gospel? That man and God have been brought back into reconciliation in the person of Jesus Christ. That man and man, people who had nothing to do with each other, are brought together into one family called the church in the person of Jesus Christ. And eternity is going to reveal that Jesus Christ went so far as to restore the distance and the division and the dissonance between man and creation. We're going to live in a glorified God and a glorified new earth. God is moving with every intentionality, with all of his energy, everything in all of history, to that place, to that day when everything is reconciled and brought back together in harmony under the person of Jesus Christ. In fact, what judgment is going to be is Christ's way of saying, be reconciled or be removed. That's the mission. That's the heartbeat of God. This is so important for us to get a hold of, because here's the reality. Racial prejudice is a problem. And it's not, by the way, just a social problem. It's a spiritual problem. Because while God is saying, I'm on a mission to bring back together, racial prejudice says we're on a mission to pull things apart. It breaks the heart of God and flies in the face of everything he's attempting to accomplish, and will, by the way, successfully accomplish, bringing all things and people together under Jesus Christ. And so the question, church, really is this. We can say everything we want to about racial prejudice and tension. And we can, as was the great temptation for me, just avoid the conversation. But the question is going to be, and I think this is going to be the question of heaven to us: how do we join our Father in his quest to bring harmony and unity where there is distance, dissonance, and discord? How do we join him in his quest? And we cannot possibly join him in his quest to bring about harmony and ignore racial prejudice and dissonance and division. Again, the question is not how do we fix it. I think sometimes we get way too heroic. We're going to fix this problem. Ray, it's going to be written of us. Remember that one time there was an epic Sunday at Mission Point, and Mission Point just fixed the whole racial problem. That's never going to be said about us. The question is really, how do we help play a part in moving towards unity, reconciliation, harmony in Jesus Christ? And so, as uncomfortable as it is, we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And we want to do this in two phases. First, we want to look at three obstacles that stand in the way of harmony. And then we want to look at two opportunities, I think, that we can lean into in our everyday to move towards reconciliation and wholeness. And we really want to do this simply. And we really want to make this about us. Because it's always tempting to go global and to talk about everything out there. But I hope we can just huddle and talk about our part in God's quest. So 3 things that are obstacles preventing us. And then 2 opportunities, things that we can maybe do about it. So please feel free to insert a very smooth and creative transition here as I jump right into obstacle number 1. One of the obstacles that I think stands in the way of us moving towards harmony and reconciliation is an obstacle that we're calling the phantom obstacle. The phantom obstacle. It gets in our way by saying this: racial prejudice and distance is not a problem. I don't understand why people keep talking about all of this racial prejudice stuff, let alone making a big deal about it. Racial prejudice and racial profiling and racial discrimination is extinct in this country. It's a thing of the past until people start drumming it up on Facebook and they start claiming these phantom sightings of a prejudice that really doesn't exist. This thing isn't a problem. Phantom. No discrimination, there's no distance, there's no problem. That is a huge obstacle in the way of harmony for very obvious reasons. Because if I don't think there is distance and discord, I can never be part of bringing harmony and reconciliation. By the way, you're going to hear traces of the gospel throughout all of this, because that is what we proclaim even in the gospel. If somebody insists on saying, I don't have a problem with God, reconciliation becomes a non-option. And I'm also thankful that Jesus Christ didn't sit in heaven and say, there isn't a problem. What's the problem? One of the obstacles keeping us from joining God in his quest, church, is that some of us either don't see or insist on denying the problem of prejudice. Now, granted, there are some crazy people who see race stuff everywhere. I mean, You know them. You know, pool is a racist game because the white ball's chasing down the black ball to incarcerate it in the corner pocket. Like, okay, come on, man. But I think what some of us do is we overcompensate with denial and say, no, then it's not a problem at all. It's a phantom issue. It's not a problem. Stop imagining stuff that doesn't exist. I was in California a few months ago working at a tennis tournament, and while I was there, I was walking on the grounds. And as I did that, I saw the sweetest little elderly lady come in my direction, and she looked as giddy, just beaming with joy. And along with her was a black family. A dad and 3 kids. And I could clearly tell she was excited to introduce us to each other. But she didn't know any of our names. And so after we did the awkward introduction, you know, she stood there just like beaming with pride. And then she looked at the family that I just met and she said, "See, I told you there'd be other Negroes at this event." So we look at each other and we're like, 1, 2, 3, and we'll pop, and we break into a jig right there and then. No, we looked at each other like, I think she's talking about us. I think we might be the Negroes in this story. And so I went and asked some of my teammates, like, hey, is Negro a thing in California? Because I'm from the Midwest, and it usually takes like 3 years for all the trends to get to where we are. So is this a thing? Like, tell us. And they were just simply mortified by this. But that's California. That's liberal, other side of the country. But I was going for a jog late in the evening a few months ago. Now, granted, that's not always the wisest idea, but I'm going for a run, and I went past a Christian college in our town that I'll leave nameless. But anyway, as I'm running there, a truck pulls out of campus with a group of students who roll down their window, and they poke their head out and they start yelling, "You're too dark! We can't see you! Ah! Honk, honk, honk!" And they drove off. Be honest with you, that one was tough for me. I went home and I said to my wife, that was a hard one. Because this is a place that I won't name that I graduated from, have deep affinity to. I was always embraced, and I remember jitters in my soul. Like, are we possibly entering a different era? Or is an old era surfacing? But you know what? I'm so thankful that it's a phantom problem that doesn't really exist anymore. A few weeks ago, I came to the office late one Saturday night. And as I was entering the building over here, where most of you came in, an event was ending at this establishment. People were leaving, people were driving off, people were coming out the building. And so as I approached the doors, I saw a lady in her probably mid to late 40s coming out of the door. And so obviously, in an attempt to make my mother proud, I held the door open for her. And as she approached me, she looked at me, her eyes got really big, and she said to me, "Oh, the cleaners are here. You were just in time. We just finished our event." I looked over my shoulder expecting to find like a bunch of people in overalls. Turns out, no. I'm the cleaning crew. Must be my shoes. But again, thankful, it's not a problem. The number of times I've heard it said about my wife, who is white, blankety blank, white girl, stealing all our good black men. Now half of me takes that as a compliment because I think I'm the good black man in that story. But for her, Those are scathing accusations. I get my hair cut often at a barbershop in Fort Wayne. The things I hear said about white women, let alone white women who are married to black men, are just mortifying. But thankfully, this is not a real issue anymore. I'm sure that for many of you, you could get up here and tell story after story of ways that this has touched your life, touched your world. I'm not even saying that these people all meant what they said maliciously, but whether intentional or whether out of ignorance, I'm just saying, can we acknowledge the fact racial prejudice, profiling, discrimination is still a problem? And even in its most non-aggressive, non-malicious form, the reality is it's still creating distance. I don't want to venture an accusation, but the lady who I ran into, I don't think views us as equals based on her assumption, and that naturally creates some distance. Church, when we say this isn't an issue, we not only withhold helping move towards reconciliation, but I think we actually add hurt to hurt. When my son shows up from school, and this hasn't happened, but if he showed up from school and he said, "Dad, I got punched in the face, that's why it's swollen, and that's why it's bleeding, and that's why it's pulsating, and that's why it hurts me so much," and I look at him and I say, face punching is not a thing anymore. Kids don't punch each other in the face in school. That may be true for you, Dad, but for me, look at the wound. When you look at my wife and you say to her, "Come on, this stuff doesn't exist," you end up adding hurt to her hurt. When I look at the certain white police officers who are being targeted for being white police officers, and I say to them, it's a figment of your imagination. When I dare, as I saw over social media, say to those victims in South Carolina, this is no longer an issue. Race has nothing to do with it. I add inexcusable hurt to unimaginable pain. So I want to at least ask us to consider the fact this may still be an issue. And I want us to consider for a moment transporting ourselves out of ourselves and acknowledging that maybe it's not an issue for me, and maybe it hasn't wounded me, but it is still an issue. Because, church, until we acknowledge that this is still a problem, we'll have nothing to do with helping towards its solution. The phantom obstacle is helping create more distance. A second obstacle is what we're calling the pride obstacle. The pride obstacle in general says, racial prejudice and tension may be a problem, but racial prejudice and distance is not a problem for me. That can be an obstacle. If the phantom obstacle is concerned with denying the problem, the pride obstacle is concerned with defending itself about the problem. This is dangerous. The primary concern of the pride obstacle is not harmony. It's proving that it doesn't have a problem. That's what it's after. I don't care if harmony comes about. I just don't want you to think that I have a problem. And so you hear a lot, I'm not racist, I'm not racist, I'm not racist. Hey, everybody, look at my shirt, I'm not racist. You should know, everybody, that I'm not racist. That becomes the obsession. I don't have a problem with those people. Well, I don't mean those people. I mean, I don't have a problem. I would never use that word. I don't even see color. What's color? What's color? What color are you? You all look the same color to me. And we become so bent on defending ourselves and proving that we don't have a problem. And this is probably one of the biggest trends that I encounter in the church. It sounds good, but it is utterly ridiculous. And it actually adds to the problem. And here's what I mean. The pride obstacle is often a group of people so obsessed with proving to each other that they have nothing to do with prejudice that they end up having nothing to do with progress. I want everybody to know I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist, I don't have a problem. Hey, tell them how I don't have a problem. And it almost becomes this absurd, almost humorous, if it wasn't so sad, game. Like some really evolved version of a Yo Mama game. It's like, let's see who can outdo each other of how not racist you are. Like, I'm not racist. Ooh, how not racist are you? I have black players on my fantasy football team. Ooh, boy, you're not racist. Well, I'm not racist because I love Mexican food. Proof. In fact, I ordered some last night. Now, my grandmother has a black warden in the joint, I'll have you know. I'm not racist. I listen to country music sometimes. I voted for President Obama. Ooh, you voted for President Obama. Well, listen, let me tell you. Listen, I mean, I can beat all of them. Call me racist. Racist. No. I have a black pastor. No! No, you don't. Woo! You must not be racist. Well, I have a white wife. Ooh, hard to beat that. Well, my mom's white, my dad's black. Well, you win. And on we go. Well, I take my coffee black. Well, I don't mean black. I mean, okay, because I'm not racist, and we get so bent and obsessed with proving that we're not racist, that we actually don't help bring about reconciliation. And one of the dangerous things about this is this passivity that's created, as we'll talk about in a little moment, sounds so pretty and it sounds so progressive. But it's just a pride that keeps us apart. Because I'm not really interested in moving towards harmony. I'm just interested in you believing I'm not a part of it. And can I just say, heaven is not impressed with that. If we're going to join God in moving towards harmony and reconciliation, we've got to be more obsessed with being reconcilers than with being right or with being viewed as right. The third obstacle, the passive obstacle. The passive obstacle says, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm sure of this. I don't want to do the wrong thing, so I'm not going to do anything. It says racial prejudice and distance is a problem I'm not going to do anything about. I'm just going to be smart, play it safe, low risk of messing things up. And for many of us, we get to this place either because of fear of failure and making a mistake, or frustration because we've run into a lot of mess and interference. You call them black, they get mad. You call them African American, they get mad. You ask them about their weave, they snap. You call them Latinos, and they go all essay on you. You ask them why white people love hummus, and it's a situation. So listen, I'm just saying I'm out. It's too messy. You move towards people, and you say the wrong thing, and poof. So I'm just going to retreat into my corner. I'm just going to choose passivity. I'm just going to avoid the whole thing altogether. And once again, the problem with passivity is obvious. I cannot help move towards reconciliation if I don't move. And the truth is, for some of us, we're very content. I'm not doing anything to stir the waters. But the reality is, if you're not doing anything, then you can't be a part of joining God in his quest. This obstacle to me is scary because it often masquerades as peace and allures us into thinking there's no longer a problem. It's like the couple that avoids talking about hard things and considers themselves close, but coexistence and closeness are not the same thing. Resignation and reconciliation are not the same thing. Passivity, church, and peace are not the same thing. Passivity backs away and does nothing. Peace goes through the mess like Jesus did into the cross, and on the other side of that finds meaningful harmony. You know, if we stay in our separate corners and we don't bother each other, if we live in our separate neighborhoods, then there's no problem. That's peace. That's not peace. That's just pretty segregation. We did it, Lord. We did it. You'll be so proud. And so we figured that if the Jews stay in the inner court and the Gentiles stay on the outer court, and if the white people stay in Southtown and the Mexicans stay on East Winona Avenue, and we figured out that if the men stay in the living room and the women stay over in the kitchen over there. Peace, segregation. Then we all have our separate drinking fountains and everybody is happy. But don't worry, we'll find some neutral, demilitarized zones like occasional sporting events or maybe certain shopping malls or maybe a Sunday morning service where we'll kind of come together for a little bit and then we'll be back into our corners. Lord, we did it. Everybody's happy and God is saying, except me. My mission isn't for people to stand at a distance and call it peace. It's to move towards each other even if it takes you through the murky mess of misunderstandings. I fear that's become the posture of the church in many ways. Passive bunch of people who say nothing and do nothing and help nothing, but feel safe and call it peace. Hanging out with people just like us. If we do nothing to engage people unlike us, culturally and ethnically, when we have the opportunity, for fear of misses or whatever else it is, we end up missing the heart of a God who is not passive in his quest to bring about reconciliation. I mean, aren't you grateful Jesus didn't choose the passive route? Because he knew the cross would be messy. And he knew we would misunderstand him when he came into our world. And he knew he had to learn a whole new language. And he knew he had to say the same things over and over and over again. And yet onward he pressed. That's the heart of our God. So how do we start moving towards harmony and reconciliation? Because listen, it's true, we can't do everything, but like we often say, we must do something. Doing nothing is not an option. Pretending it doesn't exist is not an option. And again, we might mess up, but we must press on. And like we said, we can't fix the whole problem, but we can make some progress. We can make it better than it was when we found it. So, a couple of opportunities that I see. And these are simple, and these are for us. Number one, I need to own my prejudice. I need to own my prejudice. Church, if we are going to see healing and change in the area of racial prejudice, discrimination, and distance. First, our own racial prejudice and discrimination has to be healed and changed. If we are going to be the change, we've first got to be changed. That's why it is so important that we acknowledge this issue. Because here's the reality. If this culture is going to experience anything remotely resembling a revolution of reconciliation, it will come about because God starts with his people. See, because we come to church to talk about the race and the prejudice issue, and naturally, we start to think about all the people out there, and all the legislators out there, and all the different people out here, and all the big global issues, and God is looking at us and saying, I want to start with you. But if I'm so proud to even acknowledge that prejudice lives in my own heart, then I shut the Spirit of God out of the corners that he so deeply wants to heal and to change. I don't have a problem. God, I'm not racist. Don't touch me there. Don't look at me there. I'm good. But here's the reality. Hard reality. We are all racially prejudiced to some degree. I think the Spirit of God will start to do something in some of us when we just admit it, for the first time, maybe. We all are. In all of our hearts, whether malicious or moderate, there are preconceived notions about people that create distrust, distance, and dissonance. And change begins with owning that, if we are humble enough and willing enough. And the reality is, this is not only about race, even though we're talking about that. I see somebody with like facial tattoos. I have preconceived notions about who they are and what they're about. And even if I never say a cruel word, my heart sidesteps distance. But I didn't say anything, Lord. Have you ever heard me say anything bad about somebody? No. If I see a black person, with dressed in certain sag and walking with certain kind of swag, I have preconceived notions, prejudice about that. About their vocabulary. There's prejudice in me about their employability. And if you're honest, you acknowledge that those things happen in your heart as well. And sometimes, granted, we're not aware of it until the context or the conditions change. My wife had a relative who had a lot of black friends, worked with a lot of black people, embraced black people. You would not think there was any issue of prejudice in the heart until the context changed. And one of the black people wanted to marry one of the girls in his family that he loved deeply. And he was like, It surfaced. No, I don't have a problem. But the reality is, for many of us, if we're honest, we'll say, no, I don't mind a Mexican server, but I'm not sure that I want one as a BFF for my daughter. I mean, it's nothing personal, I just don't know their family. Oh, yeah. And you've taken steps to invite them over to get to know them. Oh, no, it's just distance. If we are honest. I might be fine with a white barista, but I'm not okay with a white boss. I may be okay with a Middle Eastern schoolmate, but I'm not okay with a Middle Eastern person sitting in 33C on my flight. Something stirs in me, if I'm honest. My point is that we are all prejudiced, and it just surfaces or intensifies by different contexts and conditions. And for some of us, it's harder to experience it because we've created so much passivity and distance. Are you willing to start maybe just praying the words, Lord, reveal and heal any racial prejudice in me? I believe meaningful change starts as we humbly look at our own hearts, owning our prejudice. Stop talking about everybody else on Facebook and start with you. Not just white people, not just black people, not just Hispanics. This applies to all and any of us. To be the change, I must first be changed. Number 2, own the problem. Own the problem. The second thing I believe we must do is own this problem of prejudice and dissonance. If we're going to see healing and change in the area of discrimination and prejudice, we've got to own the problem. I cannot meaningfully help bring reconciliation unless I feel it is somehow partly my responsibility to do so. Meaning it is somehow partly my problem. I'm not saying we're saying it's our fault. Here's what I'm saying, more importantly, that it is in fact our calling. And I love the gospel. Again, Jesus didn't say sin isn't my problem. I knew no sin. He became sin for us so that we might become reconciled to God as we take on his righteousness. We've got to make this our problem. Here's the deal. I don't know if you knew this. Heaven is not looking at our culture. Even this last week, heaven is not looking at the Supreme Court or the legislators to somehow be instruments of change in the culture. Heaven knows God has already sent a vehicle through whom he wants to change the culture, and it's us, church. It's us. It's not a Confederate flag. It's not a constitution. It's us. We are flying off the handle and losing our hope because the world is dark. What do you think the church is here for? God is like, man, if only there was a light in the world. If only there was salt in the earth. If only I had a vehicle through whom I can channel my mission, my passion, my heart. Woo, what would happen in that place? But the reality is he has placed the church here. And while we are running ridiculous commentaries on Facebook, the Holy Spirit is saying, can I please breathe change into you? Can I please breathe change through you? We've got to acknowledge this is our problem. But the beauty of it is housed in the church is also God's power. We've got to take this on and ask the Lord, what do we do about it? Are you willing to start owning and embracing the fact that the Lord has put the church in the culture, not only as a prototype of what he's doing, because we ought to be a bunch of different people from different backgrounds embracing each other. The world's like, what? Why are you all together? But beyond being a prototype, we ought to be proactive in bridging distance where we can, getting messy where we can, starting in our everyday world. So a couple of things. And then I want to show you a video that was so encouraging to me in the last day or so. But here are 2 quick challenges. Number 1, start a conversation. Start a conversation. Let me make a confession to you. One of the cultures I struggle with the most is actually the African American culture. Hard. And do you know why? Because I'm black. And so there's this immediate assumption that, we're all going to just get along. And ladies at all kinds of places are like, y'all meet each other and get together. And I'm like, our journey is different, our story is different, but I feel pressure like we should somehow. And so that's been a cause of tension. And so I'm like, I don't want to make a mistake, because immediately I opened my mouth. I'm like, whoa, what happened to you? So I'm like, I'm just going to stay. Believe it or not, it's safer for me in a white neighborhood. So I started going, and I don't mean safer physically, but I mean for my heart. And so I started going to a black barber in Fort Wayne and just asking questions. All right, I'm so nervous to ask you this, but what do you think about me as an African? Because I've always wondered that. And so I asked. And now I go back every other week. One of my great friends, Jay, and I, we chat about everything. So why do you say that about white people? Oh man, let me tell you a story. Oh my goodness, a struggle is real. Start a conversation with somebody who you might naturally stand at a distance from, but you've got to first admit that you stand at a distance. Start a conversation. Hey, can I ask you something? Because I'm a little anxious, and the last time I asked this, it didn't go well, so is it okay if I press in a little bit? Start a conversation. It's amazing what that does. Number 2, end a conversation. End a conversation. This is my challenge to you, because many of us are surrounded by people who use racial slurs or just behave in ways and speak condescendingly with all kinds of stereotypes about people. And we're like, well, I'm not saying anything, so I'm good, Lord. End the conversation. I want nothing to do with that. And hear me out. I don't care if it's your family. I mean, God would have joined your quest, but it was my nana. No. If you continue to press into that kind of prejudice, we can't continue to show up and bring our kids and expose them to this. End the conversation. In the workplace, wherever, you cannot speak about women that way. I'm done. And it'd be amazing to see what the Lord begins to do. It doesn't have to be an epic stage. It can happen in every day. In fact, I want to show you a story here real quick. And thank you, by the way. Tyler's going to come up as the video wraps, and we're going to just quickly take communion together. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, this is such a beautiful opportunity to say, in him, what was once distant is now brought back to God and to each other. But before that, just watch this encouraging video of some people that you might recognize.
Through a long series of events, somebody donated this trailer to Mission Point. And Mission Point started to take over this trailer and take ownership of this trailer, and it was a mess. To the point that they actually considered, what would it cost to haul this thing away?
We had tons of people come from Mission Point to do work and to clean it up and to, just make it look so nice. And Gabe and I came a few times to help with that.
This was actually the place where we established our first connection, where I actually viewed her as anything other than a friend. And so God kind of used this place as one of the places to draw us together. He made it clear as we were working through fixing up the trailer that I should move in. And so I did. I moved in, and a few months before we got married. And so after we got married, Jamie and I lived here together, which was just, has been great.
I grew up no more than a quarter of a mile from this place my whole life, and I never stepped foot in this trailer park because trailer parks do have a negative stereotype. But we quickly learned that people here are very kind. Much of what we had projected onto trailer park type people was wrong. And I'm really glad that we're wrong. Not only for our safety, but because I think it's often our stereotypes that keep us from relationships with people. So just realizing not everything we think about people is true, and everybody has a story, and most people are nicer than we think they are.
I think that we have both thought along the way that we've got to establish some programs, or we've got to be going out, we've got to do all these things to make sure we make connection with people. And we've realized that over the course of the 3 years that we've been here now, that it's been the little things that we've done that have ignited change. And now we're invited to people's birthday parties and cookouts, and now that we weren't before. And it's been because we've just established connection and we've built relationship over years.
My big desire, my big picture goal is that every single person in this trailer park hears the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not really our job to make sure that they believe it and take it on as their own, but we do have a responsibility to share who Jesus is with our words. I also have a desire to back up our words with actions. We want people to feel loved and seen and heard. I think a lot of people here just want somebody to listen to them. So yeah, just simple ways to serve people and make sure they know that we care about them, I think, is another way that we can share who Jesus is.
If we're faithful in the little things, others see that and they're observing that, and then they're drawn in to why are you so different? Why do you do things? Why do you do that? The kids are notorious for asking us, why do you do it that way? We've never seen that.
Every kid is really hungry after school, so we just constantly have a big bowl full of fruit available, and they come and knock on the door and ask. Usually the first thing is, can I have a piece of fruit? And they're like, hey, it's good to see you, and just trying to ask them about their day and who their teachers are and what they learned and how stuff at home is going. We have a neighbor down the street who is supposed to have surgery. And so I went down yesterday, hey, when is your surgery scheduled? Can I help you get set up with cabs and so that you can get there? And I just met another neighbor who had a baby. So hey, let's get together and our babies will play and we'll talk. And so just trying to meet people where they're at and build relationships and also be helpful. Just becoming friends with anyone has taught me a lot about different types of people and how everyone has a gift and everyone has a perspective, and that makes community richer. And inviting people in who you might not normally invite in is really a beautiful thing.
You don't have to live in a trailer park to meet your neighbors. It just so happens that in a trailer park you're forced face to face with your neighbors. But you can be intentional living in a big neighborhood or a neighborhood with big houses. If we continue to pursue our neighbors just like the Bible calls us to do, it's just a matter of whether or not you pursue and whether or not you push into the uncomfortable. There's a lot of uncomfortable situations here, but it can be just as uncomfortable living in a big neighborhood. So people are longing for connection. Will we push into that? Will we pursue that? Will we pursue them? That's really the question, I think, for all of us.